We all want to be agents of change at some level when we are hopeful people. And I think as parents, part of our job is to help tell our children, here are some action items. If that is breaking your heart, here's something you actually can do to be part of the solution of a problem, but to never feel like you have the weight of everything on you.
Welcome to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast, a weekly podcast providing career and creative inspiration to help you build a purpose-filled life. If you're interested in tapping into your creative potential, pursuing a career with passion, and building on your biggest and best resource, yourself, please join me on this path. I'm your host, Nancy Moore, and I want you to know that I'm on this journey with you. So let's get started. In this conversation, you are going to hear from Dr. Amy Emerson, who has a heart full of hope. And you will understand what I mean by this when you hear our discussion. Having hope is a critical component to well-being. This fundamental pillar is backed by science, with studies indicating it is one of the most single best predictors of well-being across someone's lifespan. How can someone foster and build hope for themselves and their family? That's where local nonprofit Hope-Driven Parenting comes into play. Dr. Amy Emerson serves as the director of Hope-Driven Parenting, and you'll learn this is an organization that provides resources, training, and support to anyone on their parenting journey. In her career as a pediatrician, she has seen the power and science behind hope and how it's helping individuals and families thrive. During this visit, Dr. Emerson shares more about why having hope is so important, the science behind it, as well as identifying hope stealers and sharing tips on how to overcome them. I hope you enjoy this conversation. So today I have Dr. Amy Emerson with me in the podcasting studio, and I have been looking forward to this conversation because you have a lot to say about hope. And hope is very important for people, and we'll get to that, but welcome.
Thanks for having me, Nancy. I'm really excited to be here. I feel like this topic is so timely, and just here we are at the beginning of the year, and looking forward, and it's just a great opportunity to talk about the science of hope.
Yeah, good. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Hope-Driven Parenting. You are the director of Hope-Driven Parenting. You are also a pediatrician, so you have a deep knowledge in that area, but I would love to hear about Hope-Driven Parenting, how it formed, what it's about.
Well, my first love is the practice of pediatrics, but because I have mothered 4 of my own and been really busy in some other areas, I have not been in direct patient care for several years. Instead, I've been working at more of a program level, or even had the opportunity a couple of years ago to do some work at the state level when it comes to just helping parents across our state, kind of knitting resources together. And so it just made sense that this was a moment when we just needed to launch something that was based on science, that used deep knowledge of pediatrics and what we've learned in years of working with families. And in partnership with Hope Rising Oklahoma, a nonprofit, we decided a few months ago that now's the time. We're going to launch Hope-Driven Parenting. It's a program that consists of workshops, social media content, lectures, materials, and they're all based on using the science of hope to empower parents to reach their goals for their families. Often in the workplace, it's common to talk about setting goals and how we're going to reach those goals. We have metrics. But in parenting, which is really the most important thing that we do, we often don't take the time to just reflect and think about, what is it that I really am trying to do? What is most important to my family? How can I be a driver towards those goals for the people that I love who are right here in my home? And so we know that there's so much that we can share with people that can just make them feel very empowered, help them decide what it is they want to work towards, and then find pathways to reach those goals.
Okay, awesome. So actual tangible resources for people in our community. Now, let me ask, is this Tulsa, or is it all of Oklahoma?
Well, it's all of Oklahoma, but we're starting right here in Tulsa.
Great. Okay.
I'm here in Tulsa, and Dr. Chan Hellman, who is kind of the scientist of hope. He's there at OU. He's based here in Tulsa, although he travels all over. And it just makes sense that we are going to launch with our first summit right here in Tulsa. But we've already lined up speaking engagements all over the state. And so I think we'll just be a traveling roadshow, hopefully bringing hope to parents. Isn't that a great thing to be the purveyor of?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I will say that Dr. Chan Hellman, he is an expert in the field of hope. And I watched his TED Talk, and it was phenomenal.
It is fantastic. I highly recommend that everyone take 20 minutes, watch his TED Talk.
Yeah.
I haven't really seen better. A huge fan of his. He just distills it so succinctly and brilliantly. And, he would say, I'm not the first. So this work, it truly is science. A lot of the initial work goes back to Dr. Snyder and a book that came out in the 90s, and just decades of research that really point to hope as being the best indicator of someone's future well-being. And so there is actually a scale that is free. People can hop online for themselves, or there's one for children to measure their hope score. And it's all based in science, which is what I love as a scientist. I know that the brain is incredibly complex, and we live in relationship with each other, but we are biologic creatures, right? There are things that we know we need to do to be healthier, and that goes for our brain as well. So the brain happens to be my favorite organ. I love talking to people about the brain and how children's brains are wired and how they grow and how we as parents can nurture them. And so a lot of those principles and concepts come into play when we talk about using hope in the way that we parent our children.
Okay. So let's talk about hope and what hope is. What is hope?
Well, there are three main components when we talk about the science of hope. So many times we use the word hope as though I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow, or I hope my favorite team wins. But when you think about that, you really have no control when you're using that word. You're not going to control whether it does rain tomorrow, whether it doesn't. So it truly isn't using the word as we know hope to be correctly. So if you look it up, when we look at the science of hope, hope has to do with three components: goal setting, pathways, and agency, or what we call willpower. And the true definition is that I know that the future can be better, and I have a part to play in that. So it doesn't just recognize that tomorrow will be better, because that feels awfully trite when you're sitting in the middle of a mess, when you're going through hard stuff, and we all have those moments. So you don't really need someone to just tell you, oh, be optimistic, look on the bright side, glass is half full, it'll be better. You actually need to feel like you have control over what tomorrow looks like, that you have a role to play in that. And so that is a key difference, that when we talk about the science of hope with people, it's important for them to understand and to learn how to maneuver that, how to use practices that boost their willpower or their will to do things differently. What are things in their lives that may be draining their willpower or taking away their agency? And then what are the pathways? What are the ways to overcome obstacles? I think for many of us, it's just common sense that if we have a goal that we're wanting to accomplish and we hit a roadblock, we just think, okay, there has to be a plan B or a plan C or a plan D. But that's really not common sense for everyone. That has to do with the way that we were nurtured and raised as children, and the people in our lives who spoke life into us, So it could have been a teacher who just, when you didn't do well on a test, was able to help you see, you know what, I can learn these principles. I can take this test again. I can do better on this after I spend some time working with someone. It could have been a grandmother. It could have been a father. So when people look back, you often can find people in your life who were never going to settle for you failing at something or giving up at something and just saying, well, that's the end of the road for you, right? But there are many of us who the sad reality is we may not have had as many of those people in our lives when we were young, but we can choose to be that for our children. All of us have a choice that we can be the people in our child's life, and for ourselves now that can say, you know what, I want this badly enough that even if this person tells me no, even if I didn't get that job offer I interviewed for, I'm going home and I'm going to figure out what I can do better. I'm going to figure out what other jobs I can apply for. I'm going to figure out who I may know that could connect me to somebody who may need more staff members. So sometimes it's as simple as helping people really sit down and think about what is it that you really want, and then break that down into the steps of how to get there, but then go a step further and recognize inevitably something's not going to go right. Right? We need to help our children understand. Rarely does everything go according to plan. And I think if we look around us these days, we have a lot of children who are having trouble kind of readjusting when things don't go just according to the way that they thought it would or according to plan. But really equipping our children well for that adversity and to be resilient. So these are words that we're hearing a lot. That requires that they have hope, that they recognize there's more than one way to get to my goal, and I actually can control how I move forward.
I love that you're working on this side of it instead of having a situation where the kids are in trouble or I'm trying to think how I want to explain it, but it's like you're being proactive and educating parents so they can do better for their kids. And so it's almost just, catching them early, as children, so they can become better, more productive adults and happier in their lives. So, yeah, I think that you're catching it when it needs to be taught.
That's what we're trying to do. I feel like my whole career has been backing up to get to parents earlier and earlier. At one point I was in a clinic and I loved the work of just working with families whose children were facing academic struggles or maybe diagnoses of ADHD or autism, and I still love working with those families. But it was always heartbreaking to me when I was seeing that child for the first time and they are in 5th grade or they are in 6th grade, and you just knew as a doctor, this is not the first time that somebody recognized this child needed a little something extra, or we needed to connect this family to resources earlier. And so it's really been fun over the last decade especially to just back up earlier and earlier. I was at Educare back in 2014, and that was just working with families of children birth to 5, and I love that space so much. There are millions of brain connections happening, not every day, but every second in these little children's brains, and it's mind-boggling to consider, but it's also so exciting to think that we really can speak into them and help during this time when their brain is growing the fastest, those first few years of life. But it still continues to grow and change and evolve. Even now we say mid-20s is when the frontal lobe is kind of fully developed. But the exciting thing is that we see adults who have strokes, and they are even able to see some remodeling, rebuilding, new pathways being built in their brain, even following strokes in adulthood. So there's a lot of work being done in that area, but I love being right in the middle of a child's life when their brain is just growing and developing, and helping parents understand the the beauty of that, kind of the majesty of that, but also not be overwhelmed with that. Because I think society can really do a number on us as parents these days and make us feel guilty. They can make us feel inadequate. They can make us feel like we don't measure up to what's happening around us. And the reality is, children need connection to other humans more than anything in the world, and that's free. So if we as adults, as parents, as caregivers, as grandparents, as neighbors, if we could just prioritize these connections with the young people around us, putting the cell phone down, making the eye contact, asking the open-ended questions, really thinking about, how can we engage together and build relationship. Those are the things that science is proving make the biggest difference in our kids' lives, not the expensive toys or being on these expensive ball teams. Parents these days, you may feel guilty if you're not able to afford for your child to travel the nation playing a certain sport. But those things are not necessarily linked to the well-being, the outcomes that you as a parent may want, right? So it all comes back to, what are your goals as a parent for yourself? What are your goals for your family? And what are your hopes and dreams for your children? And how can you teach them to be goal setters? Because I think an important aspect to understand about hope-driven parenting is, we as parents do control a lot of the factors. We control things like nutrition, and we might control bedtimes. But there are a lot of things we cannot control, including our child's willpower, right? So I, as a parent, may want for my children to learn to do laundry more than anything in the world. But if that's not my 17-year-old's goal, it's going to be really frustrating and hard to make him accomplish that goal. So how do I get creative as a parent, and how do I tie that to something that might be really important to him? So it might be his goal to always have a clean jersey when he plays in a basketball game, or to have that favorite hoodie ready for the weekend, right? So helping him understand the way that you have that clean hoodie for the weekend is, if I help you learn to do these things for yourself. So it's not about laundry. It's actually about him and what he's wanting. And also, and this is really hard for me as a mom of 4, letting go of some of the things that just in the scheme of things are not that important, are not things that are going to be the drivers for our children, but may have been supremely important for ourselves. An example of one of these might be ironing clothes. Or a funny thing that I see a lot on social media is having these boys wear long pants in the winter, right? I mean, it sounds silly, but the amount of angst that some of us as moms feel over seeing our child head off to school in shorts when it's 20 degrees outside, and the battles at home that have happened over that. So maybe some of this is also letting go of some of those things, because if it's not their goal, if they're not cold, it's not important to them, they don't care that they're wearing shorts to school, their goal is actually to look cool, right? So understanding what is their driver, or had this conversation this morning, they get hot in the classroom, right? So not dwelling on the one thing that we as a parent want, but also taking the time to understand what's driving them, what are their goals, and where are those moments we can align to really do big things together.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. I might just ask you right now, because you're giving all of this great information, if you could talk about the event that you have coming up, and share that, because parents will be able to learn. I'm thinking I'm an empty nester, and it would have been great for me to think of things just a little bit differently. Several years ago, but still you can help people here. So talk about that event, what you're going to offer, who it's for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the event will be March the 2nd. It's going to be at the Herman and Kate Kaiser YMCA. just across the river, right on the west side of town, a beautiful facility. If folks have not visited a YMCA in our area lately, they need to go because they just are providing so many resources for families. So we're excited about the place. It is for everyone. We have made the event free. There are some people who are kindly helping us pull this off so that we can make sure we break down as many barriers for people's attendance as we can. When they come, it's going to be from 9 until 1. When they come, we hope that when they walk in the door, no matter who they are, where they come from, how they feel that day, that they will immediately feel like they are connected to other people who are doing the same thing they are as a parent, acknowledging this is hard stuff, but it's worth working through the hard, right? We are going to have 3 speakers. I'll be one, and I love to give practical advice. I will be talking about willpower and things that kind of drain our willpower, things that boost our willpower, a few other things. The day will start with Dr. Chan Hellman, who travels the world these days, and I'm really excited that he will kind of lay out the science of hope it is science, but he does it in such an approachable manner that it will feel like when you leave there, it will all make sense to you. And then Dr. Angela Ferris is going to come from Oklahoma City. I'm so excited about her joining us. She has done deep work in child welfare and within the DHS system, as well as at OU. She's a professor. And she's going to talk a lot about goal setting and pathways to get to our goals, and a lot of lessons that she has learned through the years of working with kids who, quite frankly, are in really tough spaces, really have their willpower depleted in many instances, and really have perhaps the hardest time of any of us imagining that tomorrow can be better and that we actually can find pathways to make it so. And she's learned so much from these young people who just refuse to give up. I love that about kids. I love that if we can tap into that piece of them that is just resilient and indomitable, they just teach us so many lessons about continuing and not giving up. And so she will be the second speaker. So there'll be 3 of us. There will be lunch provided. It'll probably be a little bit of a working lunch because we'll do a Q&A session while people are eating. And one of our goals is to just make it as concise as we can. We're going to pack it with really helpful information, but we're not going to keep people all day because I also know as a parent, it's really hard to do anything all day on Saturday. So 9 to 1 is when we will do it, and then we'll wrap up. And when people come, we're already working with lots of community partners and friends to provide them with resources, whether it be books that they can take home and read with their children, whether it be goal setting worksheets, whether it be just talking to people, maybe even some tools from some vendors here in town. I'll kind of keep some things secret because we're still working out the details of that, but I'm really excited because when we started imagining this event, I've been to too many as a parent. You go, you hear great stuff, you have great aspirations, you leave, and not that many things change, right? But we really want to give people the tools that they need, not only the knowledge, but also the tools so that they can go home and really feel like, okay, starting tonight, here are the things I can do. And I'm a huge proponent of just picking one thing, honestly. I don't think everybody should change everything all at once. I think just having a plan about what the most important things are for you and what are the most attainable things sometimes. You know, sometimes we're in a pretty low hope place in our lives. Maybe we have experienced the death of a loved one. Maybe we are living through some trauma, and quite frankly, our goal may be to just survive another day. And we want to say, that's admirable. You know, there are times in all of our lives when just waking up, getting out of bed and getting dressed, that's a goal, right? That's a goal. And so for some of us, sometimes we really have to step back and just relieve ourselves of any guilt or any shame that we're carrying, that we haven't been enough or we're not capable of enough right now, and just recognizing, no, actually you're doing some of these things really well, and you need to give yourself credit. So a big part of the science of hope is also celebrating milestones. And who does not love a good celebration? But I think it's something that in parenting, we just don't do enough of. I think when everything goes well, we make it through the day, we get kids in bed, then we can kind of check the day off of our list and consider it a success. But I think we're missing a huge opportunity with our kids if we are not pointing out for them times in their day when they really saw great success, right? I have one of my own right now, and her just getting up in the mornings and just being in kind of a happy state of mind and not saying negative things to the other people in my house. That's something that she wants to do that. She's working on doing that. And shame on me if I don't call that out, as I'm dropping her off at school and tell her how proud I am that she accomplished that goal, because that's really meaningful. When we think about the most important things in life, when our children are young, we're really good at celebrating, their first step, their first word, some of these big milestones that have just been ingrained in our minds. But I don't know that we spend the time celebrating some of the social emotional milestones that our children are making along the way, that in my opinion, I would argue are even more important. So, making that first friend, maneuvering that first hurt feelings, and making it through that okay, and just deciding they are not going to hurt other people, but they are going to instead channel that into something good. Those are the kinds of milestones that I love to point out to parents in their own children, because I think those are the things that we just have to keep nurturing and calling out and encouraging more of.
Oh gosh, absolutely. And you're going to share with people at this event how to do that. Okay.
We are.
So you give some great information on your social media. I feel like it's a resource, even for me as an empty nester. Yeah. So you had shared about hope stealers.
Yes.
And I wanted you to kind of talk about what hope stealers are, and then some tips for parents on how to overcome those.
I think about this a lot because if I'm being completely honest, I fall victim to some of these myself. And I think that there's power in us recognizing that none of us is perfect. None of this, at the end of the day...
Parenting is hard.
It's hard for the best of us, yes. Right? I mean, sometimes even with myself, I'm like, you should know better than to have done that, right? Yeah. You're a pediatrician. But the reality is, it's hard. It's 24/7. There's no more important job, but there's no harder job. And I love this philosophy, especially around nurturing young children, that I guess came out around the 50s, kind of this good enough parenting, good enough mothering. And, at that time, there are numbers to suggest, if we get things right about 30% of the time. Now, this is not talking about if you feed your child a meal 30% of the time.
Yeah.
But if you have the reaction to your child when they spill the milk or when they fail the test or, they do the big thing, if we can be responsive to our little ones about 30% of the time, that may be good enough. And I think we're all shooting for better than good enough, but it also helps us to recognize that no one's perfect. No one is getting this right 100% of the time.
And some days just being good enough, some
days that just has to be good enough, and we have to recognize tomorrow's a new day, right? Our children are the most forgiving humans on earth. And I love to talk to parents about this because I have yet to see a young child, when a parent apologizes about something they've done, I have yet to see a young child not receive that so beautifully, and it to actually magnify the love and the connection between that child and that parent and overcome whatever that was that happened. They're so forgiving of us. But I think we need to ask for it, right? I think we need to acknowledge sometimes, you know what? We've been talking a lot in our home about using kind words and not raising our voice at each other. And I absolutely did the thing that we're trying not to do. I just want to tell you how sorry I am. I wish that I had not lost my temper. I wish that I hadn't done that. And I think it's important to not make excuses and just acknowledge to them, I messed up. We all mess up. And just like I tell you, when we mess up, we clean it up, we make it right, and we move on. I'm just asking you if we can hug it out and we can move on. And children invariably always love to go in for that hug, and they love to move on from that. But I am a victim of hope stealers as well. So it's a good reminder to me. One of them is overcommitment. And I think this is just such a rampant problem in our world today. There's so many more things available to us than our parents ever could have imagined. And some of that is good and wonderful. And then some of that is just really stressful. And you think about the amount of time that you spend organizing around having your child at a certain place at a certain time, or driving them in the car. And as much as I love some of these young children activities, like 2 and 3 years old, I often just want to say to parents of young ones, there's no place more important for them to be than in a nurturing, loving home, their home base, with their home person, their mom, their grandmom, their dad. And if you are giving up every evening of your family's life to be on the road and doing an activity, and you're not carving out some time just in your special place together, reading the read aloud books or tucking your child in or sharing the family meal, then I think we're missing out on some of the things that really matter the most. So I think not being afraid to say thank you for that invitation, I really appreciate it, but we already have plans, or we will look forward to doing this next time you host an event, or next time there's a ball team that we can sign up for. I think that's really healthy for us to show that to our children. And when I look back, because I have 4 teenagers, as much as I tried to do that, I regret not doing that even better. And we actually, in my house, we even role play, like how to respond to someone if they invite you to do something and we want to do all the fun things, right? But how do we role play, acknowledging our appreciation for the invitation? We acknowledge how much we appreciate that person, but we have to say no. And I think as parents, just even working on some skills like that with our children, and then letting them see us exercise some of that, can be really powerful, really important.
So it's all about everybody being on the same page that your family is a priority, and organizing your time accordingly. Because it was important for us to have a family dinner every night, and we couldn't do it every single night, but probably 5 nights a week.
Yeah,
we could. I mean, there's inevitably things that come up, but acknowledging that your family is a priority, and you as a parent want to spend time with your kids.
Exactly. So then that would be a goal. The goal could be nurturing relationships within our family unit, or the goal could be spending more family evenings together at our house. And maybe you recognize right now you're spending 1, right? So your goal, I would suggest, shouldn't be to spend 7 evenings at your house. Your goal perhaps would be, we're going to make sure we hit 3 nights every week at our house together, and get to that point, celebrate what you've done, reevaluate. If you're loving it, let's say, you know what, it's important enough, we've seen enough fruit from this, let's push to 5 at our house. And also giving yourself wiggle room. If your goal is you really want to have dinner around a dining room table, that's a goal. But if your goal really was that you wanted to increase the time that you spend together with everyone under one roof, there are other pathways to get to that, right? So it could be making sure that you use time in the car as you're dropping off for school in a more meaningful way, right? It could be prioritizing breakfast and everyone being willing to get up 20 minutes earlier so that we actually are together in the mornings and we start our day off with a happy thought or going over what we have for the day. So there are lots of different pathways to accomplish the goal, as long as you know what your goal is that you're going for.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. You're full of good ideas, Amy. I love it.
I've had a lot of years to practice and do things wrong, right?
Well, yeah. Live and learn.
You
and
learn.
Like we acknowledge we're not perfect. So
that's why
there you go.
grandparents are usually so great, right?
Yeah. Yes, I know. Okay, so before I started recording, you shared a couple of statistics that were kind of jaw-dropping for me that I would love for you to share with my listeners just so they can understand kind of where we are as a society as it relates to hope.
Well, according to CDC data that was released last year, nearly 3 in 5 or 57% of U.S. teen girls felt persistently sad or hopeless in the prior year. So this is self-report, right? But it mirrors what we are seeing in pediatrics and in the worlds of psychology and psychiatry. So numbers are sky high with people who are waiting for appointments to see a therapist or psychologist. Numbers have increased when it comes to diagnoses of anxiety, depression. Sadly, we've seen an increase in suicides, which is heartbreaking. To even imagine that our children could be so hopeless that they can't even imagine continuing. And so I think this really speaks to what we see as an epidemic right now. And the boys' numbers are up also, but they're about half of that of the girls. So what we know is there's something going on with our children. When I talk to friends of mine who are in general pediatrics, they say that the number of visits every day that have some sort of developmental or behavioral component to them are well over 50%. Some report 80%. And that number used to be about 30% that we said. So what we also see is that younger and younger children are seeming to be suffering from some of these problems like depression and anxiety. And so I think it's really an important time for all of us to kind of take a deep breath and really get real about some things that are going on in our homes, because that's what we can control, right? We know that things out in our world are tough, right? They're tough. And we know that people have lived through tough stuff before us, and they will live through tough stuff after us. We don't get to control what is outside of our home or our children's circle, but we can definitely control some of the things that come into them. You know, it's funny because in my house, we have lots and lots and lots of conversations about really tough topics. I would say as many as most other families, if not way more. But it's always in the way I frame it, right? I want my children to have an awareness that bad things can happen, but I don't want them ever to feel like it's up to them to prevent the bad thing or to fix the bad thing. So I'm trying to think of an example of this, but this morning on the way to school, we actually were talking about the conflict right now in Gaza, which is really, it's overwhelming to me as an adult with a lot of life experience, just the depth of sadness. And so in talking about it, we kind of framed it in the arc of history, and kind of framed it by understanding there've been some awful things that have happened through the ages. And we also talked about the fact that really our role right now for my 15-year-old is just to be kinder, be gentler, be more patient, be more long-suffering, more forgiving with the people she comes in contact with every day. Right? Because I cannot have her get out of my car and think that she has to save the planet from global warming, right? Or that she has to save all the animals that are outside in the cold, right? But what is one thing that I can send her out of my car or out of my home to do? We all want to be agents of change at some level when we are hopeful people. And I think as parents, part of our job is to help tell our children, here are some action items. If that is breaking your heart, here's something you actually can do to be part of the solution of a problem, but to never feel like you have the weight of everything on you. I think another very, very real just epidemic is the amount of time that our children are spending in front of screens. And I think a lot of people may not even be aware. And so I would just encourage everyone, if you haven't lately, and it happens to the best of us, check your child's screen time and just see whether they have a phone or a Kindle or a laptop, see what devices they may have in their midst, and see how much time they're spending. Some kids have devices in their rooms and they're just up. Not only are they losing sleep, but they're up, watching things that just compound the problems. Even a healthy amount, what we would consider healthy amount, and I have to acknowledge, I don't let my kids on social media for a long, long, long time. I have a 15-year-old begging for it right now, and I haven't given in yet. So even kids who just spend a short amount of time on Instagram, there are studies that show that, especially the girls, when they finish, they feel sadder, they feel more depressed, they feel more lonely when they stop scrolling. And I think that's important for us to just acknowledge that. I don't think there's anything else in our kids' lives that we would just allow in and kind of justify or make an excuse for. But for some reason, that one we just kind of have grown numb to, I think.
Right. I'm glad that you're pointing that out, because I honestly don't know. And I think about this often, and I don't know why, but I'm not sure how I would have handled social media even in high school, because there I'm sure were girls getting together or things happening, and I would have loved to have been included, but I didn't even know about it. Right. But with social media, you not only
know about it,
yes,
but it
looks
weaponized, and people intentionally might make you see that you're not in the picture. It's important for us to talk about. It's important for every family.
And
I
limit.
always say, limit. Be on the offensive. Don't find yourself on the defensive when it comes to the posture around how your family uses tech. I think it's fair to periodically ask, is this healthy for us? Is this helping us? Is it hindering us? Is it getting in the way of anything? It could be that your child is playing a video game and there's absolutely not anything negative about what they're doing in that moment. But ask yourself, are they giving up anything that they could be doing instead of, right? Like, would that have been time that they were downstairs with the family preparing the meal together, right? And are you willing to give that up for them to be in the room playing the video game? Because we have to ask ourselves the hard questions. And to any parents who have younger children, I would just say it's so much easier on the front end of it to just go ahead and make your decisions, set your boundaries, have your expectations, know what your goals are around tech. That's so much easier than just going with the flow of what you see happening around you and just kind of giving in or letting your child do whatever peers are pressuring them to do or friends are doing. Don't be afraid as a parent to just say, here's how I feel about it, here's how we're going to approach it, and we're always going to talk about it. I mentioned my child who is lobbying for social media right now, and she put together a presentation that she asked my husband and I to sit down for so she could talk to us about it.
So let me ask, were you open to that presentation, or in your mind were you thinking, it's a no, but go ahead?
We were totally open to it.
Okay.
We were very open to it. I think our posture was very open to it. We actually were excited about, we can't wait to hear what you've put together, what you're going to talk to us about. I heard something one time that I absolutely have always loved, and it is limit your no's. So for us with this particular topic, it's something that we always can say, that's going to be a yes. It's a matter of when the best time is, right? So we had a great conversation. We did a lot of laughing during it. She was able to feel very comfortable. We haven't said yes to it yet. We did end it, and we were able to give lots of praise about, how we see her doing so many things wonderfully. We're so proud of her. Posed a few questions for her to consider and told her we want to keep talking about it. So it's not easy, right? None of this is easy.
I like that approach, though, because no is a hard stop. Like, she's put in a lot of effort and thought.
Right.
And, that just to say it's yes, but let's continue, not quite yet. Yeah. Let's continue the conversation. So I like that approach, because especially when you know it is going to be a yes eventually. Okay, yeah, I like that. Okay, so I am going to share in my show notes the link to your event. And so people can sign up for that, or find you guys and sign up for that. And then I'll link your social media. I'm really excited for you in that event. You're going to be able to help a lot of people, I know. Okay, so in wrapping up, I have a theme of grow more in 2024. And so I would love for you to give an example of how you have grown either personally or professionally, or how you're planning to do that in 2024 specifically.
I love that. I will actually be celebrating a really big birthday this summer. And I also have my oldest child launching out of my house. So I feel like 2024 is a really big year. And rather than feel overwhelmed by some of these things, I really am very intentionally trying to celebrate the positives of this. Hope of science, it's not an emotion, or we couldn't teach it. The fact that we can teach it, it's a mindset. It's really a mindset. So what I have really intentionally tried to do is reframe some of the things that people have traditionally put really negative connotations on. And I see it as just an opportunity of growth for myself to really reframe the negative, or what could potentially be negative, because often it's not even negative, right? And to really be focused on relationships. And I think sometimes I'm really good. I love friendships, and I have a lot of beautiful ones, but sometimes I need to refocus on the relationships in my own home, right? So refocusing on relationship with my husband, I would say, is one thing that in 2024, I really want to make sure that I prioritize.
Okay, good. I love that. That is perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today and sharing the science behind hope, your heart for hope, why you are the director of Hope-Driven Parenting. This has been a great conversation, and I know it'll help a lot of people. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Nancy. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap on this week's episode. I want to thank you for listening to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast. It means the world to me, and I'd love to connect with you. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Sharing Passion and Purpose, and Twitter at Passion Sharing. Also, if you like this podcast, it would mean a lot to me for you to subscribe, rate, and review it. And as always, all my show notes will be available on my website, sharingpassionandpurpose.com.